Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Please consider subscribing and check out our Patreon for more. Enjoy the video. Andrew sat on a park bench and tried to figure out what he was going to do that day by leaning back. After a big fight with his parents a week ago, he left their house. Slowly, he stretched his body and tried to get rid of the stiffness from sleeping on the ground again. His clothes showed that he was homeless because the dirt and grime had almost worn into the fabric over the past week. He stood up and walked slowly toward the shopping mall that led to the park. He was thinking about his life at the time. He remembered his older sister as a kind person who took care of him when he was young. His sister would often use him as a dressmaker's dummy. He thought about the prom and party dresses that his sister had made and that he had worn to help finish. Grace had also made him his own dress, which he wore in secret until his parents found it and kicked their own daughter out on the street. He tried to get in touch with Grace a few times, but his parents found his letters and made him watch as they were burned. He moved to this city because a few weeks ago Grace called him on the cell phone that he bought with the money from his summer job the year before. He had sent Grace a letter with his cell phone number on it. She had called him a few times to make sure he was alone each time. She always seemed to know when he was alone, as if she had been keeping an eye on the house to make sure his parents weren't there. He shivered as he tried to push away the painful memories of how his parents had forced him to be apart from his older sister. Also, he shivered because it was a cold night. To warm himself up, he walked quickly. Now that he was close to the mall, he went inside quickly to get out of the cold. When the mall first opened in the morning, it was quiet, so he walked quickly through the atrium to get to the other end. This led to a place that was made to look like an old English village. Andrew liked this part of the huge mall. He always found a place to sit and look at the fake buildings for about an hour. One store's window display of a very girly party dress always caught his eye. It was pink satin with white lace, and layers of white lace petticoats stuck out of the bottom. He made sure to walk by the store at least 3 times a day so he could look at the dress. As he walked by the display a few times, he let his mind wander to how he might look in that dress. He knew the style of the dress, and he thought he could feel his sister's touch on it. But the name of the shop owner was not his sister. He wondered who the shop's owner was and what kind of person would buy a girly outfit for someone. He had seen moms come in with their daughters and women come in with their male partners. As the day went on, he sat down on a bench across from the shop and watched the morning customers come in and out. As morning turned into lunch, he walked by the shop again, but this time he stopped to look at the window display. As he looked at the dress, he stood there and let his mind wander. His mind became calm. He saw himself with long, strawberry blonde hair that reached his shoulders. He also saw himself at a party wearing a very girly dress and talking with other girls while laughing. He stood in front of the display with his mouth slightly open as he put the picture of his face where the wearer's head would be on top of the dress. Mrs. Georgina Richards was inside the store and watched the boy as he looked at the dress in the window. Inside the shop, it was set up to look like a Victorian ladies' outfitter. All of the personal items were in drawers with glass fronts. She was wearing a white pinafore over a dress in a classic style. As she watched the boy, she smiled and wondered if he liked the view. She walked to the door and opened it. She stood there and looked at the boy as he looked up. The boy looked at her twice, turned bright red, and ran away. Georgina watched him run away. She didn't know where she had seen the face before, but it looked familiar. She shook her head and went back to work. As she worked on a dress that was ordered to be sold right away, she realized why she knew the face. It was a face that looked like Grace. She turned to the phone on the counter and dialed Grace's dance school with a puzzled look on her face. Her best seamstress also ran a dance school where young people who showed promise were trained for jobs in ballet companies and dance troupes. She was good at her job, and over the past few years she had helped a lot of girls. They were respected and well-known in their new jobs. Georgina waited a little bit impatiently for the phone to connect. She was Grace's friend and knew some of her story, but Grace never told her that she had a brother. She sighed as the phone rang. and after about a minute, the other receiver was taken away. "This is Grace Fuller talking." The voice was friendly, but there was a hint of authority in it. "Grace, this is Georgie. How are you?" Georgie asked right away. "Okay, hun, what's up? Do you have a project for me or something to say? In fact, Grace, I'd like an answer to this question. Do you have a brother?" At the other end of the line, there was a pause, and Georgina could feel her friend sigh. She waited for her friend to talk and tell her what was going on. Slowly, the voice on the other end got louder and more in control of itself. "I do have a brother, and he is about 18 years old now. Is something wrong with him? He looks fine, but it looks like he has a hard life." "Oh my God, where is he?" Andrew was sitting on a bench in the mall square while this conversation was going on. He was scared because he had a close call with the shop owner while looking at the dress. He took a deep breath to calm down, put his hands in his lap, and looked at the floor while he was thinking. He started to hate himself because of how he felt and because he wanted to be a girl. He thought about the past and wondered if his parents had found the 3 dolls he had hidden under his bed before he moved out. While he was sitting there, Georgina was closing the store so she could go find the boy. She walked around the mall and watched the boy sitting. She moved slowly toward the bench where she thought her target was sitting. When she saw how sad the young man looked, her heart went out to him. Then she saw that he was sitting with his legs together and his hands in his lap. She then saw that he was actually pretty short and had a nice face. She made up her mind and sat down next to the boy. She slowly reached out and put her hand on the boy's shoulder. When the woman from the shop touched his shoulder, Andrew looked up. She gave him a smile and a gentle squeeze on the shoulder while she waited for him to say something. "Yes, ma'am. Please come with me." Andrew got up and went with the woman back to the shop. Andrew was worried about what was going to happen as they walked in silence. Georgina walked next to the boy, deep in thought. She was thinking about what was going on in her head. Grace called back. Georgina listened and smiled to herself. She was a strong woman who always seemed to get what she wanted. The other thing about her was that she was a kind woman. She heard that the boy was more like his sister than he was like him. In the schoolyard, the boy played with girls more than with boys. This showed her what the boy was thinking, and she thought back to an article she had read and wondered. Andrew paid close attention to the woman who was walking with him. As they got closer to the shop door, he was a little less tense around the woman. The woman, who hadn't yet introduced herself, led him into the shop and shut the door. She turned the closed sign upside down and then led him to the back. Andrew walked behind the woman to a space in the back of the shop and sat down at a table when she asked him to. He watched the woman as she sat across from him and put a kettle on to boil. He waited for her to speak so she could tell him what she wanted. Her face was soft and almost motherly. The woman sat on the other side of the table from him and put her well-kept hands on the table. As she looked at him, her smile got warmer, and she seemed to judge how he would react. Georgina smiled at the boy and let him calm down while she thought about how she was going to ask him. "So, I guess we should start by saying hello. My name is Miss Georgina Richards, but you can call me Miss Richards." The voice got a little rough, like that of a strict school ma'am. "I'm Andrew Fuller, Mrs. Richards. I can see that you like the dress in the window." "No, Miss Richards, I had the idea for my sister." Andrew looked down and looked at the floor. Georgina let that one go for a second or two while she paid close attention to the boy's face. She saw a dreamy look pass over it for a second or two, but she kept it from the boy by smiling to herself. She let the boy sit there while she made the tea and brought it to the table, where she poured 2 cups. She sat for a minute and looked over the edge of the teacup. She thought for a few seconds about her next question and waited for the boy to relax more. "Andrew, would you wear that kind of dress? I could never pay for it." His answer was vague, as if he had thought about the problem. She smiled because she had surprised the boy, and she pursed her lips to figure out what to do next. She hadn't told Grace what she was thinking, but she knew that the next steps could only happen if Grace was okay with them. After they drank the tea, Georgina gave Andrew enough money to spend a few days in a hotel and bought him clothes. She signed the hotel register and told the clerk she was the boy's aunt. She ran back to her sleek sports car and drove through the town to her house. She made call after call while driving. Grace agreed with the plan, so that was fine. She asked a judge-client and her lawyer to help her write up some papers. She told the boy to come back to the shop in 3 days because she had a lot to do. Andrew got ready for his meeting with Miss Richards on Thursday morning. He thought about what the future held for him and where his life was going. He was 18 and didn't have much of a chance of graduating. He thought a lot about his sister and wondered where she was in the town. Miss Richards bought him a suit for today, and he looked very nice in it. He walked through the city for 2 blocks to get to the mall. When he got there, he went to the area where the boutique was. He stood outside the store window where the dress was hanging out. He wondered who bought the dress and was jealous of the girl who wore it. He opened the door to the shop, and behind the counter, Miss Richards was waiting. She had just helped a woman, and when she looked down at the boy, she smiled. The woman looked at the boy who had just come into the store, bought what she needed, and left quickly. Andrew thought that the woman must have thought he was strange because he went into the shop. After the woman left, Georgina closed the shop and told Andrew to follow her to the back. Back in the kitchen, she told him to make them both some tea and bring it to them. He was trying to get up the nerve to ask what had happened to the dress in the window. As he tried to make the tea, Miss Richards sat on a chair by the table and told him how to do it right. He was making mistakes, and his slight clumsiness was making Miss Richards a little annoyed. He finally finished making the tea for the shop owner, who was very picky about how it was done. After pouring the tea, he sat down across from her and waited for her to say something. She sat down and looked at the boy for a while. Then she reached down and put her document folder on the table in front of her. "Andrew, are you thinking about something?" "Yes, Miss Richards. I did wonder what happened to the pretty dress in the window. It's still here waiting for a certain girl to wear it." Andrew's face fell, and he stared at the table. He played with the teacup by turning it back and forth. He felt like his whole world had just fallen apart. His dream of wearing that dress was over. He let out a sigh and then straightened his back to act like a man. Miss Richards was doing something with a stack of papers which she was carefully reading. He had no idea that those papers would have such a big effect on his life and future. All he could think about was how he'd never find his older sister again and have to go back home. As the boy stood up, Georgina looked up and saw that he looked like he was giving up. When she looked closely into his eyes, her heart melted. She then looked down at the papers in front of her. The adoption papers were the most important thing. She had gotten his parents to sign them with a little help from Grace. Then, a psychologist wrote a report about the boy's behavior and suggested that she needs to see the boy to confirm her diagnosis. The next forms were a declaration of a name change and a birth certificate, both of which were blank and needed names added. "Andrew, please sit down." "I'm sorry, Miss Richards, but I have to go." "I told you to sit down." Andrew sat down with a stunned look on his face. He didn't hear the last part of the order, but he didn't need to hear it again to do what he was told. He sat with his hands in his lap, and his face was pale as he looked down at them. She got up, walked around the table, and stood next to where he was sitting and gave him a hug. She was holding a few pieces of paper. "Andrew, who would you be if you were a girl?" "I'd like to be Alice because she had so much fun in Wonderland. So, Alice Georgina Richards, straighten up and wipe your eyes," Andrew was told by Miss Richards. "What? I'm not Alice. My name is Andrew," he said in a low voice. "Once I write your name here, here, and here, you will really be Alice. But you can change your mind if you want." Andrew read the papers carefully and saw that they were true. When he realized that the woman was telling the truth, he almost passed out. Before he could answer, Georgina grabbed his hand and led him into the main part of the store and to the changing rooms. He stood there and looked at her for a while, his face white and shaking. She moved the curtain aside and went into the room with him. On a hanger in the back of the booth was the party dress from the window. Nylons, pants, and socks, along with a shiny black pair of girls' shoes, were on a chair. "Alice, if you want, your mom will help you get dressed." Andrew looked at the dress, and his imagination took over. He ran his hands over the soft pink satin. He let out a sigh as his dream faded, and the idea that he would be a boy in a girl's dress took over. Georgina watched as the boy's face changed, and she could tell that the boy was afraid. She gave the boy who was going to become a girl a gentle squeeze on the shoulder. Andrew looked up at the woman and saw that she was mostly looking at him with sympathy. When she saw the scars on his back, though, her face changed. "Come on, Alice, it's time for you to look nice." A frilly petticoat was thrown over the nylons and pants. When the dress finally came, Andrew almost passed out when the skirts and petticoats touched him. Then he put on a very wig with 2 bunches of hair held together with pink ribbons. "Sweetie, it's time to go home. Mommy's workday is over, so we're going home." "But I can't wear this to go home." Alice nodded as she followed her mother out of the shop and through the mall. She kept waiting for people to make fun of him when they saw that he was really a boy in a dress. As they walked through the mall, Georgina saw one of her friends she had made a beeline for. Alice could tell by the pressure on her hand that the direction had changed, and she saw that they were heading toward a woman. "Hello, Sylvia! Oh my God, it's you! Whose child is this? Say hello to Alice, my daughter." "Hello, miss," said Alice, trying to make her voice sound as girly as possible. She was getting scared, so she hid behind her mother and peered out. "Oh, she's cute and shy, too. I just finished the paperwork to adopt her today. You should set up a play date between her and my grandson." "I will, Syl, but we should probably go home because she needs a nap." With that, she led Alice through the mall and out to the staff parking lot. She led her to a sleek, smart sports car that beeped when the key fob was pressed. She got into the driver's seat, and as the engine started up, she put her well-manicured hand on the wheel. As they drove, the older woman gave tips on how women should act and behave. Since it was the middle of the afternoon, there wasn't much traffic in the city, so the trip was pretty short. Alice first realized that their trip was coming to an end when the blacktop turned into gravel and the wheels made a crunching sound. The driver gently brought the car to a stop in front of a large Victorian manor house. When the car finally came to a stop, the door to the house opened and a pretty maid was standing there. Georgina told the boy who had been made to look like a girl to stay in the car because she had to meet someone else from the house. As she talked, a middle-aged woman in a formal outfit walked up to the door and smiled when she saw the car. When Georgina got out of the car, the other 2 women curtsied deeply. She talked to them for a few minutes. The older woman left the group and walked to her car where she opened the door for the passenger. "This is your nanny, Miss Gardine." "Say hello," Alice's mom told her. "What's up, Miss Gardine?" Alice talked back. After the nanny was introduced, the seatbelt was taken off and Alice was helped out. This place was so well set up that it looked like a palace. Antiques were all over the hallways. She just stood there and the nanny took her hand and led her through the house. After going upstairs and through the house, Miss Gardine led Alice into the room and set her down at a small table with a glass of milk and some small cookies. Alice sat down and ate the cookies and drank the milk. After a few minutes, she started to feel tired. Her nanny helped her get out her dress, petticoats, and socks and led her to the girly bed. Her nanny tucked her in for a nap. Miss Gardine smiled as she left the new person in the house sleeping on the bed. Georgina sat in her living room while her maid brought her a glass of dry white wine. After 45 minutes, she heard a shout from upstairs. She smiled. Andrew woke up and had no idea where he was. He was in the bed in a girl's room. "What's wrong, Miss Alice?" A tall woman in her middle years stood at the door. As the woman said this, Andrew remembered that he was now Alice, the girl who lived here. Thanks for watching. Be sure to check out Patreon for a lot more content and early access to YouTube videos.